Today we're going to have our final shir on Hafrashas Challah. We're going to do the beginning of Siman Shin Lamed. We're not going to read all the dinim; they're not also relevant to us. We'll do some halachos. Isas Kichavim Petura. If someone who's not Jewish owns a dough, then it's part of Hafrashas Challah. Afilu Lasha Yisrael, even if a Yid did the lisha, he was the one who needed it. We know that Hafrashas Challah depends on the kneading of it, but it doesn't make a difference if it depends on who owns it at that time. Right? You can't eat it with milk. You can eat separately. But so the even if he does the kneading, it doesn't make a difference as long as it's owned by someone who's not Jewish. Then it's not Chayv Hafrashas Challah, and that's the reason why. That's the reason why in most of our companies we don't do Hafrashas Challah, because most bakeries most of these kind of companies are owned by someone who's not Jewish. So even if the employees are Jewish, it doesn't make a difference. Okay, Rishel Yisrael. If it belongs to a Yid, it's Chayav Hafrashas Challah. Even if the person who's working is not Jewish. So in a North bakery, it's owned by a Jewish person. That the employees who do the actual kneading might not be Jewish. It's still Chayav Hafrashas Challah because it's owned by Yid. That's what it depends on. Whoever owns it at the time of the kneading, that's when it's Chayav. Okay. Now it even clarifies that Nasna Yisrael b'matana, it might like Gilgal Nasna Chayav, it's Machar Shigul Nasna Petura. It all depends on the time of the gilgul, of the time of the mixing the flour in the water. Okay? I'm not reading every word here. Perhaps all of it's irrelevant. Then Allah Bay says, he says, if two people own a batter together, it's still Chayav Hafrashas Challah. It doesn't have to be just owned by one person. Okay, so that brings up the obvious question of halacha gimel, which is, we said if someone who's not Jewish owns it, it's potter. We said if shutfin owns it, it's chayiv. So what happens if one shutfin is a yid and one is a goy? What's the din in that case? So it says halacha gimel yisoshu shutfim of kichavim. So now someone who's Jewish and not Jewish are shutfim. So one of them would be chayiv, one of them would be potter. So which one is it? So the din is in ein b'chelik hayisol kashir petura. What it depends on is the yid's chelik have a shear. So if the batter of dough is 50 pounds, the batter of dough is 50 pounds. 50 pounds. The batter of dough is 50 pounds, and the Yid owns a 20% ownership of the dough. So his 20% ownership is worth 10 pounds. He owns 10 pounds worth, so it's Chayav Challah. The amount that he owns would be an amount to be Chayav Challah. What happens if the whole dough is 10 pounds? It's holding is 10 pounds and he owns 20%. You own 20%. Then the Yid's share is only 2 pounds. He's not Chayav Hafrashas Challah. So it all depends. But there's a shutfis. You find that if the Jew's portion is equivalent to enough to be Chayav Hafrashas Challah, then the Chayav Hafrashas Challah, and if not. Okay, not so relevant to us. Okay, so there are more dinner about people who are not Jewish and other people who are potter. We're not going to go through those things. Okay, so so this makes a difference for most of our factories. Most of the bakeries that we would give hashgacha to commercially are not owned by someone who's Jewish. There's no chiyuv of Hafrashas Challah. We don't think about it. Okay, there's one reputable hashgacha. Who what they do is, when they have a Jewish-owned bakery, what they do is, they say is, we don't want to deal with Hafrashas Challah. So what we do is, they make sure that all the dough belongs to someone who's not Jewish. Okay, at the time of the gilgul, at the time that you mix the flour in the water, the owner is not the Jewish owner who owns the factory, and therefore they don't deal with Hafrashas Challah. They don't have to deal with Hafrashas Challah. I don't know if they do that on local bakeries, but on commercial accounts, that's what they do. So what they do is, right, all fair question. What they do is they make sure that when the factory gets deliveries of flour, they take ownership of that. The not Jewish person at the plant takes ownership of the flour. Now, before I tell you the details of what they do, in very short, the details of what they do, their place that points out that there's a big mileage, there's an advantage of this over other times that we do mechiras. Okay, other times that people do mechiras, the two common ones are mechiras chametz. Okay, I own chametz before Pesach, and I want to sell it to someone who's not Jewish. And the other one is a behemoth mevakeres, an animal that's about to give birth to its firstborn. It would be a bechor, which has all kinds of serious kedushas and issues to deal with. So you sell the animal before the baby is born, so that when it gives birth to a bechor, it won't have kedusha to it. So this place points out, he says, in both of those cases, you have something that belongs to the Yid, and now you have to do a kinyan to sell it to the guy. So you got to get it from me to him, which has challenges to it. Okay, it's not so easy to make a kinyan from a Yid to sell a guy something that's metal. Not so easy. He said, but in this case, we're not selling it from the Yid to the guy. We're just saying the Yid never owned it. The buying of this flour, the guy bought it. It's not bought by the Yid. The Yid who owns the factory doesn't buy the flour. He's not He never bought it. So it's easier to say that the Yid did nothing al pidin Torah and al pidin the Machusa. We avoid his taking ownership. If he never owns it, that's easier than trying to sell something that he owns. Okay, it takes away from a little bit from the harama and makes it a little less serious. Now,
how did he never own it?
Because he never did make a kinyan on it. The Yid who owns the factory,
selling the company or selling the dough?
He doesn't sell. The guy buys. The buyer is the person. So in other words, the company makes an order. The company makes orders flour, but they don't order for the company. They order for John, who works in the company. So the company never bought the flour. So what they do is, okay, but before I get to the kinyan that he makes, their point is that they're avoiding the Yid ever owning. It's not that the Yid owns it, now we have to get it out of his rishus. The Yid never takes possession of it in the first place. He never owns it in the first place. He has to now get rid of it. Now,
how's that? He writes a check?
So he said it's first of all, okay, wait, he says three and a half things that they have to do. First of all, the Yid has 3.5. Yeah, 3.5. 3.5. One is, the Yid has to have in mind he doesn't want to make a kinyan. He says, I'm not being kind of the flour. Okay, let me just say what he says. Second is, he writes a contract. Okay, he writes a contract that says that anytime this company buys flour, it's not being bought by me, it's only bought by John. Okay, he's the one who owns the thing. Second is, he should give the chutzner, the place where the flour gets stored, let's say if they have a bin or they have a warehouse where they keep the flour, the guy takes ownership of that, so he makes a kinyan chutzner in it also. Okay, so by doing this, and he throws in also another thing, there's usually no kinyan mois, whatever you want to call it, because people don't pay for things live. When a company get a truckload full of flour, they don't, give the guy $1 and say, give me my flour. They get billed later, so there's no kinyan mois. And all the other kinyanim, the guy is doing it. There's one more. He says, there's a shaila, whether guy can make a kinyan chotzer if he's not standing there. We once talked about it. If chotzer mitam yad and chotzer mitam shlichus and ain't shlichus achon. So it would really be better. This is the half. It would be better if every time they got a delivery of flour, the John who's taking ownership would stand next to the place where they get the deliveries to take the ownership of it. Okay, so if you did all these things, he says you don't have to. You could be making this house, you can make on that. He says, so if you did all these things, then that person takes ownership of it, and now he owns the flour. And that's what they do. They do this on a regular basis. Okay, now there's a huge downside to this. Aside from the questions of is this a haram? Are you allowed to do such a thing? Is that all of this has a huge disadvantage over mechiras chametz and selling the behema. When you sell a behema, that's having a bechor, or you have do mechiras chametz. It's a one-time thing. Today I sell it, and tomorrow I buy it back. Okay, so it's a one-time thing that has to be done, and everyone has to sit around, and Rabbi Reese sits at the table, and they make this kinyan and that kinyan. They do all the technicalities they have to do, and then after Pesach he meets the guy again, and he makes all the kinyan back, and they do everything is controlled. Okay, but that's not what's going on here. Here, this is an ongoing thing. Twice a week the company gets deliveries of flour, and twice a week we're counting on them doing all this stuff. Twice a week we're counting on that he owns the warehouse, and he has in mind to do this. I mean, do you think the people in the purchasing department 2 years later, when they order, say, we need another truckload of flour, they have in mind, no, we're not being kind of this for us, we're buying kind of for the other guy.
Everything else is ongoing.
Well, no, it's also not ongoing because does the owner really mean to say if you own the warehouse? Right. So you're saying to the owner, you need to say is, he owns all your flour. He owns all your warehouse.
You have the guy do the ordering.
Right, and so maybe the person who ordered, but on paper it says, all this warehouse and every time we buy flour all belong to John. Really? Is that what he's going to do? And he's going to make a kinyan back? There's no way to make a kinyan back without someone standing there to do the technicality.
Why do you need a kinyan back?
It's
there.
Okay. No, it's not stealing. You're saying John owns the flour. Right. They bake with his flour, and they sell the cookies, and then they keep the money. Yeah. So I guess they could do that. But
however he can split his profits.
So it all builds into the harama, to the how it doesn't look so straight. Okay, but they say, listen here. But so now we're headed to where we're, so to speak, really headed. Okay, I was telling you that there's a hashgacha. I had heard that they did it, and I called them that yes, they still do it. Okay, with a reputable no, I'll tell you afterwards. Okay, so I'll tell you afterwards. Okay, so they threw in another thing. I don't remember we took that in Pas Yisrael. There's a shach that says that if Yid owns the company, it must be Pas Yisrael. It has to be Pas Pater. Ramesh is true about it. They say so we avoid that problem also. We don't have to be samach on Ramesh. Okay, it's all set. But anyhow, so what's the reason why they're doing this? Okay, underlying this whole idea to sell the flour to the guy, underlying that whole plan, which is not so, we can say, not so straight, not so simple, underlying this whole plan is they don't believe in the tevel system. Okay, that's what's underlying this, is that everybody else has a different way of dealing with this problem, which is the tevel system. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And underlying the idea to let's get rid of the flour, let's make sure somebody doesn't own it, is we don't really believe in the tevel system. Okay, so we're going to take that as an opportunity, especially since it's our last time, to go over. We talked about the tevel system many, many times. So I'm going to go through a summary, relatively briefly, a summary of the tevel hafrasha system and what were the difficulties and shilas that the world that came up with it. And as we go through it, really what we're explaining is, aside that for us that we're reviewing it, is what was going on here. Why do these people not want to be samach on? Why do they not want to be samach on the tevel system? Okay, so I'm going to divide what I have to say into three parts. Okay, the slides are made a little late, so it would be nicer if I was made more on time. I don't even know if it's going to work. Okay, I'm going to break into three things. There's going to be time-related questions, as you see on the top, something about the remote hafrasha, and things about the act of the hafrasha. Okay, a whole bunch of issues, of potential questions and issues to throw. Okay, the most. Before I go, let me just remind everybody what it is. Tevel hafrasha system means this: the company keeps making dough. A yid bakes tevel dough, or he takes tevel matzah, and he puts it into the factory, and every morning he gets up and says, you should know, every time that the company makes a lisha, every time they make a batter of dough, another little bit of the dough that's in my tevel matzah or my tevel dough is going to become challah on that batter. Okay, so if they make 12 batters today, then 12 little pieces become challah. He makes a cheshbon of how much he did. He knows that in his batch that he made, there's room for 500 hafrashas. He knows they make 10 hafrashas a day, so then every so often he needs to replace it to make sure he has enough tevel, so to speak, that's there.
You said tevel would just be tevel for challah, right?
Tevel l'chal, yes.
Tevel for anything else.
Well, it's not having insurance. No, tevel for challah. For our purposes, for us that's tevel. Okay, so I split my as we're going to go through things, between tevel dough and tevel matzah, because there are advantages to one over the other. So as we go through, we'll talk about what the things are, and we'll separate them like that. Okay. The most significant issue that there is for the tevel system, okay, is that for a couple of months in the summer, they're being mafresh from batter from one year on the other. Okay, you're not allowed to be mafresh from this year's flour on last year's, or the other way around. And for a couple of months in the summer, as we spoke about, for a couple of months in the summer, the tevel matzah that's there in the factory was made from last year's flour, and the dough that the cookies or the bread they're making is from this year's flour. Okay, it's possible to cut that down. You could try to get it just for a couple of weeks instead of 3 months. You can cut it down to a certain number of weeks, but it's impossible to avoid it in factory situations. As we spoke about that, logistically, it's almost impossible to solve it. In a tevel dough system, okay, when you're doing it, when you're dealing with tevel dough, it's a little easier to manage, and that's because when the companies, as a rule, know when they're getting in the new flour, okay, it makes a difference in the protein levels, and they will often know. So the mashgiach can arrange potentially to make sure he comes back when the time is, make up a new batch of tevel dough at the right time. Okay, with tevel matzah, it's impossible to deal with it. Rebelsky had a reason why maybe for chal chutzar should not be. Most of the people did not accept that. Living and otherwise, people who are living otherwise didn't agree with it. I'm saying implicit. His shita, which was in chal chutzar, there should be no din of being mafresh from one year on the other one. It's all over that everyone assumes that it is like that. Okay, next. The person who makes the hafrasha, in our case, Rabbi Oppenheimer, who says every day he gets up and says the hafrasha should happen the following way, has a little bit of a difficulty, which is to say, if he makes, let's say he's sitting there today, actually it's a very good case right now. He's going to sit there this morning and he says, for these and these companies, every time they make a new batter, there's going to be a hafrasha. Until the next time I say this. Well, the next time he says this is going to be on Tuesday morning, because it's going to be Yom Tov. It's Shabbos, and then Sunday and Monday. He's not going to say it until Tuesday morning again. So what happens if the company gets a delivery of flour after he said it, but and they already used it before he made the new hafrasha? Okay, so he can't make a hafrasha on things that the company doesn't have yet, or it's questionable. If he can make hafrasha what they don't have yet, so he's going to be making hafrasha and saying, I'll be mafresh challah for each thing. They get a delivery an hour from now. They bake with it on Monday, and the baked goods go out. He was never mafresh challah for those things.
So however it is.
What?
On the bakery.
No. He said, but his wording is, when they mix the flour in the water, I want Hafrashas to happen. He's not able to because. So if he would say is that the stuff that happened already, he would avoid that problem. So sometimes in the midst of this is for commercial bakeries. In a lot of the people who say this say, I'm being marked from every batter that will be for the future, and any ones that I missed. They'll throw in any ones that I missed in case they missed one from yesterday, which is fine because it's challah sutzar. You can eat it as long as there's some left over. By the time he can't even have to do it every day. So we do it. They do it every day to try to keep up with new things coming out and being marked before it goes out. Right, but he could say it like this time. He's not going to say it from Friday till Tuesday. He's not going to say it until Tuesday morning. But by Tuesday morning, the whole dough won't be eaten up yet. It might have been baked and shipped out, but it won't be eaten up, and he could do that first. Okay.
Is that more of a evidence?
It's Jewish companies. Jewish-owned companies have to be not from.
I'm talking about a Jewish-owned industrial company. I'm not talking about North
Bakery. That's going to be open Monday.
There are lots of companies that open every Shabbos. This really every Shabbos. But here it's even more because we have a couple days. But it's the same thing. You have every Shabbos. Okay, and then that doesn't make a difference if you're using tevel dough, tevel matzah. It's the same. That's the same kind of issue.
We don't pay that.
On Pesach, yeah. Okay, and the next is. There's a question, is when he says, I'm going to be marked, everything that happens from now until then, thank you, from now until the next time I say this, means is he's making Hafrashas Challah on Shabbos and Yom Tov.
Right.
Okay? He said between now and Tuesday, if the company keeps on baking, he's making Hafrashas Challah between now and on Tuesday. So if you remember, we spoke about then, Rikreger brings it, the Magen Avraham says it's not a problem. It's okay if I do something today that sets in motion something's going to happen on Shabbos. It's going to happen on Shabbos. Chazanish says it's okay. Shmuel Shabbos Chazai says that it's okay. Rabbi Krieger himself is not so happy about it. Rabbi Krieger himself says that he can't set up a kinyan. You can't set up a kinyan that it should happen. You do something today that it will come into effect on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. Something you wouldn't be allowed to do on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So that's what the question is about. That's what they talk about it. So this issue. Again, most people think that it's not a problem altogether. And this issue could be avoided if instead of him saying, I'm being marfish for whatever batters that come in the future, and I'm covering myself for anything that came in the past, if he would say is, I'm being marfish only for the past. If every day he would say is, I'm now being marfish for every dough that was made that I didn't do Hafrashas on yet, I'm being marfish now, l'sha'avar, then it would also be good. Okay, he would avoid that problem also. Okay, that's no one says that. Some people say the other way. They say, I'm doing for the future and anyone that I missed. But according to this, you would avoid this problem by saying, I'm only doing for the past.
Whichever is better according to Allah.
If you say what? No. That's not what they say. They say, I'm going for the future. If I missed any, I want for the past.
And add in the clause.
And whichever is better. Okay. I'm not sure. Okay. Fine. Okay. So that's our time-related questions. Okay. Next. The fact that the Hafrashas is going on remotely, okay, in other words, if in your home, when you make bread, you take off a piece, you do it right there. Okay. Here we're doing this remotely. Okay. The fact that we're doing it remotely brings up another 5 questions. Okay. The simplest is that when you're doing it with this system, that you put the tevel there, and then you do hafrasha, means is that as a rule, it's only going to be wheat flour. Okay, so with tevel matzah for sure, they only make tevel matzah of wheat flour. That's what they make it out of. But if they're doing other grains, then you potentially have a problem. With tevel dough, it's solvable. You could solve that with tevel dough because you can make tevel dough wherever you want to.
Is there matzah for anything too?
No, it has to be tevel matzah. It has to be matzah knows matzah challah.
They make the tevel matzah.
But in practice, that's not happening. That's not what's happening. In practice, they're doing it from wheat
So I
flour.
rely on it because it's all called Duggan, it's all called
No,
grain.
you don't rely on anything. No,
Then how does
that's why one of the reasons why we prefer using tevel dough instead of tevel
I
matzah.
understand. But what happens, we have a company that makes oat milk cookies.
Okay, so that's only for the video. Okay. Another thing is, Shlomo Miller said that he had reason to think that you can't be mafresh from baked goods on raw dough or the other way around. Okay, that's what he had such a thing. He says Shlomo Zalman says it's not a problem. Okay, but most people say that it's mutter. Okay? That's not really a concern. In tevel dough, of course, it's not an issue because it's doing from dough on dough. Okay,
No, unless it's baked, because you missed it.
Oh, you're going to do for yesterday's. Okay, no, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. What?
The blue rock is also resets out if it's baked.
Blue rock is also if it's okay. That's a good point. I didn't think of both of those. Okay, but again, most people think that it's mutter anyhow. Okay, another big issue that we have is that when you do the hafrasha remotely, what you're doing is like this. You're saying is, there's this box of matzah, or this batch of dough, and a little piece is going to, I'm going to make this little piece, hafrasha on that, what the company just made. Okay? Well, the Makar Chaim says that when you do that, when you do hafrasha, when you take a piece of it, hafrasha for something, it makes the whole original dough also chulin. You can't make hafrasha only on part of the dough and not on the other half. Okay? If you have this big thing, you can't say, I'm being marfish on this side, but not on this side. Okay? We talked about it. Just give me it. Makar Chaim brings a raya that he thinks that it's not true. You can't be marfish on half. Okay? You can only be marfish on the whole. If you're marfish on part, the whole thing becomes the head of hafrasha. That's what he starts with to say. If so, the whole tevel system would be out the window. Okay? The minute you did one hafrasha, you'd be finished. Okay? Rabelski said, how could that be? He says, it's mishnayos. There's like 5 mishnayos in a row that say you could do this. Okay, they talk about doing this. They don't talk about tevel systems in industrial bakeries, but they talk about doing this, doing hafrasha just for part of it, and let it part had hafrasha and part of it did not have it. Okay, so Rabelski wanted to say was, okay, that the Makar Chaim is only talking about cases when you did the hafrasha on the thing itself. He said, I want to take off this little piece to be hafrasha on the right side of what I have, and not on the left side. But if you're doing it on something else, then it would work. Okay, that in itself would cause its own issues. Shulchan didn't think like that. He thought the answer from the Mishnayos was that the whole deal of the Makar Chaim is by Chalas Chutz. Okay, if you remember, we spoke about in Chalas Chutz, there might not be such a thing as tevel altogether. Okay, it might just be a mitzvah hafrasha. So by Chalas Chutz, once you did the mitzvah hafrasha, there's nothing more to do anymore. It's not like it's still tevel left over. By Chalas Chutz, it's not like that. Okay, which is a good answer. It's just hard to read into it. Nobody says that then. Nobody says that applies here and not over there. L'maisa is the good news is, many people argue in the Makar Chaim, and guess what? Even the Makar Chaim argues in the Makar Chaim. Okay, by the end of the piece, he says he brings a right that he's not true. He says, I don't know why it's true. He says, but it brings a right that it's not true. That in fact, you could be marfish on part and on the other part, and that's good enough. And Dayan Weiss actually himself talks about the tevel hafrasha system, and says that you shouldn't be worried about this problem. Okay. Okay. A big issue. The other one we consider not such a big issue. A big issue is that when you do a remote hafrasha, you're going to end up, kemat in every single case, that the hafrasha is going to be shleim and a mukaf. Okay? Mukaf means is that when you marfish from one thing on another, they have to be reasonably close to each other. Okay? There's a whole to-do. What does it mean to be mukaf? How do you put it in front of the camera? There's a question of exactly what it means to be mukaf. If we were dealing with tevel dough, okay, if we're dealing with tevel dough, it would be more possible to get it into the same room if we're doing tevel matzah, it's easier to get it into the same room than tevel dough. Tevel dough's got to be in a freezer, okay? But kol shekain is, if we say like the Gra, if you remember the Gra was very clear and very to the point to explain what it takes to be mukaf. And in short, the Gra said is that if the finger is in a kli, and the kli is covered, then it's impossible for it to be mukaf. Even if the kelim are not covered, then the kelim have to be touching each other. Okay, well, getting the kelim to touch each other is completely hopeless. Okay, and if the kelim are sealed, are closed, then obviously, he said you can't be mukaf no matter what you do. Okay, so there may be those who are going to grow up. It wasn't clear if there were. And mukaf is only dealing with chatchila. It's only dealing with chatchila. But the mice is, the hafrasha that we're doing is seemingly a shleim and mukaf, to the point that there's at least one person I know who says he doesn't even try. He doesn't even waste his time. Say, I'm not even going to bother putting it into the factory. I'll just leave it in my own freezer because I know I'm not going to be in the mukaf anyhow, so I might as well just make it convenient for me. I know something like that. Okay. So, okay. The last for this section is that when you do hafrasha, I'm doing hafrasha not in the bakery itself. Okay, I'm going to go back to Norsha. In Norsha Bakery, the people, even if the person who does hafrasha is not the owner is in and out and around, and the Mechaber Bua, he's giving you implicit permission to do the hafrasha. When you're doing it in a remote location, then you lose out on that. Okay, there's no contact between the owner and the person doing the hafrasha. So with time, you lose out on this problem of shlichus.
It's in the contract.
It could be in the contract, but you lose out on it, and even that has its issues because you can't make shlichus on. You can't make shlichus on something that doesn't even exist yet. Okay, you can't make shlichus on a flour that wasn't even. I make time contract today that you should be mashlich in 12 years. Now we talked about that, whether you can or you can't do that. We talked about that, whether you can or you can't, whether Patrick can or cannot do that. But we avoid this problem because if the yid owns the tevel matzah, which is pretty easy. It's easy to own tevel matzah because we give it to the company. Or if we make the tevel dough and take ownership of it, then there's no one who would have a problem with it because we say schim tam shlichus. We say zachalam shadvanim. Say it better. Zachalam shadvanim. If it's our stuff, we can do zachalam shadvanim. Come on, everybody would agree. In that case, you can do zachalam shadvanim.
When I make the dough by, let's say, one of my bakeries, I should be cleaning it for myself?
Yes, we should have the ownership of it, so then there's no issue. That takes away from the need, and we can do zachalam shadvanim. Okay.
Or pizza store.
Pizza store, they do it.
Okay, so because I have to have a Shem Shabbos thing.
Yeah,
Why should you take ownership of it?
If I take ownership of it, if I take ownership of it, then it's a complete source of what I'm doing for him. It's a complete source of what I'm doing for him, and I can do just on the then I don't need to be in my mission of the tevel, the tevel matzah, or the tevel dough. It belongs to the CRC, so then I can do the hafrasha because it's my stuff, and I'm allowed to do it for him as a zachan bottom.
Let's not take any more.
Well, what's the big deal with the shlichus? Because the new stuff coming in, is that the only issue?
Well,
I'm not going to re-argue the whole thing, but
right.
But now, that aside, that's the only problem.
And then there are minimal problems, which small problems, which is like, what happens if Rabbi Abraham can't do it today? He gets you to do it for him. We can move the shlichus around. What happens if he retires and we need to get a new person to do it? So we have to redo everything. And also the shlichus is, do we have to go to the owner to get the shlichus? Let's say it's a big factory. The owner never shows up over there. So we just talk to the manager. We have questions about that. Could the manager be reminding me of shliach when he's not the owner, when he's not a yid? We have questions like that. There may be technicalities of getting the shlichus out when I'm not. I never see the owner. There is no owner. He's in Acapulco. Okay. The last is about the act of the Hafrashas Challah. That's like this. Okay. The first is he's got to make sure that he says his nusach says that for blila raka it happens only after it gets baked, because that's the way you're supposed to do blila raka. So he just has to do it right. That's not such a big deal. And the way they say the nusach is, they say, I want the hafrasha to happen, half an hour after they bake the dough, mix the dough. This way it gives someone who's on hand a chance to do hafrasha in the traditional manner. Okay? If someone's actually standing there in the bakery, they can make the dough, take off a piece, and do real hafrasha. So you don't take away the mitzvah from that guy. So we take it away in half an hour. Okay, those are not such big deals. Okay, the next thing is that it's really long. There's a lot to say for each one of these bakeries. There's a whole to do what you have to say in order to make the hafrasha work. So in Hartzvi, he said that you're not allowed to do that. Okay, he had said in his case you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to say. Well, I skipped past that. It's such a long thing to say. The guy instead of reading that whole spiel, he wanted to say is, I'm being marvelous like it says on my paper. Okay? So the Hatzvi says that you can't do that. He says it doesn't work. In his case, he says it doesn't work. Chazanish says that it does work. Chazanish says it's okay to say that I'm being marvelous according to what it says on the paper. And we said at that time that it can say that even Hatzvi would be moida in our case, where the nusach is official and written up, and it's designating a specific thing, that even he would agree that you're allowed to do the hafrasha. You're allowed to just say, I'm doing the hafrasha according to whatever it says on my paper. According to the official nusach, he would agree you're allowed to do it. Okay, we're almost done. Okay.
No meaning.
The way the nusach is set up, it says that the person doing the hafrasha is supposed to make a bracha. Okay, he's supposed to say a bracha. If he knows the company's going to be working, he should be making a bracha. Okay, so Shlomo asked on that it's kamat the ferish in Magen Avraham that you can't do that. That when you're setting something in motion, and it will not be chal until later. In this case, the pidyon ben, or in our case, the hafrasha. Today you're doing the actions, and tomorrow the king is going to be chal. What you're trying to do is going to be chal. You can't make a bracha not when you said it, and not when it's chal. Neither one of them. You lose the bracha you cannot make a bracha at either one of those times. For that kind of a mitzvah. In fact, that's why he said not to do it, because you don't lose the mitzvah. So by us, where the person is doing the hafrasha today, that should be chal, and right now, it should be chal in an hour from now. When they mix flour and water, then it should be hafrasha. Seemingly, there's no basis for making a bracha. So I don't have an answer. We don't have an answer to that question. What should be the basis for saying you're allowed to make a bracha? Okay, most of the people who I know don't actually make the bracha. Oh, I'm just saying it's in the official nusach. Great people wrote those nuschos, and it's we don't have an answer to that. Okay, and okay,
we do like a bracha.
But there's no reason for it. You can't make a bracha. You should not. No, that doesn't make a bracha. You can't. I don't think it does. You can't make a bracha.
Isn't that a problem in itself?
That you lose the bracha?
Yeah.
That's true. I forgot to mention that. The Magen Avraham. That's the Magen Avraham that you lose the bracha. So I forgot that part. Shlomo says, right? No. You're right. So Shlomo says, he says you can't. You're not allowed to make a bracha. That's why he says not to the opinion of Ben. He says, and Shlomo says, so Mamela, why are we setting people up to this kind of a system where they're going to lose out on the bracha? Okay? I just said that you're not allowed to make the bracha, but he goes another time and says, so why would we make a system where you lose out on bracha? Now,
what's the suggestion?
He didn't lose out on the problem. So he says, don't do the mitzvah either. You know. So okay. Last is there's a little thing, which is that when you there's a thing that you have to be mitzvah in the makom. You have to say where the challah is, where the truma is going to be, and that is we satisfy that. That's good enough. What we do is enough to satisfy that. But there is one last thing is that the Ramah says that the minig is to always be mamash kazayas. Okay, the Ramah says supposed to be mamash kazayas. We talked about why. Not so clear why you have to mamash kazayas. We talked about you have to mamash kazayas, and of course we're not mamash kazayas, and we don't do it for logistical reasons. When we mamash kazayas for each time to do it better, we have to send truckloads full of tevel. We truckloads full of tevel. So we cut it down so we make it a quarter a gram, a 20th of a gram, a tiny little bit, so we get hundreds and hundreds of hafrashas out of our thing. But Lamai says we're missing out on this minig, whatever the basis for that minig is.